Elon thinks so much in Twitter memes and has really gotten himself into an online brain at this point. So I don't think he thinks about the real world consequences of the things that he posts on the platform.
It's almost as if you're talking about Donald Trump.
Donald Trump has called Elon Musk a BS artist. They've sniped at each other quite a bit. Now they found this kind of happy friendship where they're complimenting each other. With Trump world, it's not always going to be that way. Someone who is in Trump world could be out the next day.
Hello and welcome to the American Forecast. It's been another momentous week in American politics with another apparent assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump. But in the wake of the assassination attempt, a different billionaire businessman has also thrust himself into the spotlight. Elon Musk, the outspoken owner of X, formerly known as Twitter, claims he was just joking when he said no one is even trying to assassinate President Biden or Vice President Harris. The White House has condemned Musk's comments and he has since deleted them. This is far from the first time that Musk's posts on X have caused outrage. Since his takeover of the social media platform in 2022, he's become a bigger, louder and more controversial presence in US politics, now openly funding and supporting Donald Trump. So, what is Musk up to? What is his relationship with Trump really about? And what is he going to do next? Well, with me to get to the bottom of this mercurial character, two New York Times journalists who've just published a book giving the warts and all account of Musk's takeover of Twitter and the very chaotic aftermath. Ryan Mack and Kate Conger. I want to start with this bizarre thing, and there's so many bizarre things here. And this is an X post, a tweet, using the old-fashioned language, that Elon Musk put out yesterday after the second assassination attempt against Trump. What on earth is going on in his mind and in the Twitter boardroom? First you, Kate.
Elon thinks so much in Twitter memes and has really gotten himself into an online brain at this point. And so I don't think he thinks about the real world consequences of the things that he posts on the platform.
Ryan, do you agree with that?
I'd love to see what's in his groups and what people are talking about in them, if that's what his group is supporting him saying. We have many examples in our book where he, passes around his phone and shows people, should I tweet this? And he's surrounded by people that affirm him, that are yes men and yes women, and really don't provide him with suitable advice. And oftentimes he's not going to listen to them anyways, which is why we get a lot of these tweets that are regretted. He takes a lot of these things down, he deletes them, claims they're jokes. But at the end of the day, this keeps happening over and over again, and he doesn't feel any repercussions from them. It's
funny, the way you describe it, Ryan, it's almost as if you're talking about Donald Trump.
There are a few similarities, I think, between them and their personalities. It's similar in the tight inner circles that they keep and the way that people kind of cycle out of that inner circle where they get upset with them or fed up with someone and push them out.
Critics of Trump have often described him as a man-child. I have to say, looking at some of the posts that Elon Musk has put on X, you kind of come to the same conclusion. He is behaving at times like a man-child with an enormous, set of toys at his disposal and almost 200 million followers, if not more.
Yeah, and I think he has a very juvenile sense of humor. Again, it comes back to him just being so immersed in online culture, and so much of the humor that we see on online platforms is, driven by kids, honestly.
There's constant jokes about women's bodies. There is, bathroom humor. There are plenty of memes, things that he takes from other platforms. So, it's juvenile, it's teenager, call it what you will, but that's just who he is.
And if you said that to him directly to his face, what would he say? Would he be embarrassed? Would he shrug it off? Would he say, I'll behave better next time?
Well, we haven't got the chance to talk to him for this book. We sent him more than 500 questions in the process of reporting this out. No response thus far. But in reporting, we talked to a lot of folks who said, he doesn't like being talked back to. Or if you give him advice, do it in certain settings. Do it in one-on-one settings where you are He doesn't feel like he's being challenged. He hates being challenged in a large group, especially, with other engineers. He doesn't want to be seen as anyone but the smartest person in the room. And so you kind of have to pick and choose if you are going to suggest something to him. And we've seen people, be fired for doing that on the spot.
It's interesting. It strikes me as if, the master of transactional relationships, that would be Donald Trump, has come up against someone else who's into transactional relationships. I mean, how much can Trump rely on Musk actually staying loyal to him?
I think that remains to be seen, right? I mean, 2 years ago, we heard Elon Musk say Trump should sail into the sunset. He was supporting Ron DeSantis heading into this election. He held a Twitter space for him where Ron DeSantis literally announced his presidential candidacy. On the other side of things, Donald Trump has called Elon Musk a BS artist, but not not censored. He has, they've sniped at each other quite a bit. Now they've found this kind of happy friendship where they're complimenting each other. But I think with Trump world, it's not always going to be that way. Someone who is in Trump world could be out the next day. And I think it remains to be seen where that relationship's going to go.
And the same could be said for Musk world.
Yeah, absolutely. I think right now their relationship has a happy balance because they're both getting something that they want. Trump needs Musk's financial support for his campaign, and that's been very helpful to him. And Musk has really wanted Trump to return to X and start posting there again. And he's finally been able to convince Trump to start doing so, although he still seems to prefer Truth Social. So they're getting something that they want and that they highly value right now. And I think that is stabilizing the relationship.
What you do so brilliantly in your book is to talk to lots and lots of people inside the company, both those, especially those, I guess, who were ejected by Musk when he took over and who kind of went through that unbelievable jaw-dropping transition period. And I just want you to cast your mind back to that period, considering the fact that the valuation of Twitter X has gone from 44 billion, which is what he paid for it, dollars, down to maybe 15, 16 billion. Why on earth did he buy it in the first place? And is that a question that he's asking himself?
I think it's something that he does ask himself quite a bit. At the beginning of the transaction, he said this isn't about money to him, and he doesn't care if it makes money. It was really an ideological purchase, and he's been able to build X into something that supports his ideology quite well. That being said, I do think he feels the financial pressure. He's taken out a lot of loans to finance this deal, and the interest payments alone on those are more than $1 billion a year. So there is pressure on Musk to make this company financially viable.
And of course, he was trying to get out of the deal for quite some time, wasn't he?
Right.
Yeah, I think he'd be the first to admit that he overpaid. I mean, he said that very publicly and tried to get out of the deal for, months, which we cover in the book. It was a messy process. He values it now at about $19 billion based on what they were offering stock to employees. Investors like Fidelity have marked it down even lower, less than $15 billion. That's a steep decline in less than 2 years of ownership. I mean, look at something like Tesla and SpaceX. They've rocketed up in terms of valuation. Twitter or X has gone the opposite way.
And why do you think that is?
I think Musk has been very successful in building these engineering companies, right? We see him with Tesla and SpaceX building products that work very well and that consumers want to buy, or in the case of SpaceX, that the government wants to use to send satellites into space. Twitter is more of a social problem. It's more of a human problem. And that is where Musk has really stumbled. It's not the kind of thing that he understands how to solve. And he's really struggled, I think, to understand what the average user of the platform is looking for.
And as we detail in the book, I mean, there was a lot of hubris going into buying this platform. There wasn't much of a plan in terms of how to operate it. It was simply, I am one of the largest, most followed people on this platform. I have great ideas. It's worked for me in the past at SpaceX and Tesla. How hard can this be? This isn't making an electric car. This isn't sending something into space. This is operating a website. And I think that kind of fundamental hubris really, really handicapped him here.
But what I don't understand is that if he wanted, to have a megaphone, a big voice on the global stage, he could have just set up a YouTube channel, right? He could have done something on social media without having to buy, the whole landscape.
Right. And he had a big platform on Twitter prior to the acquisition that he used quite regularly. But the thing with Elon Musk is that he really strives for total control. If you think back to the beginning of the Twitter deal, he was invited to sit on the board of directors and have a voice of the company. But that wasn't enough for him. He didn't want to be one voice among many. He wanted to be the controlling voice of the platform. And at the time, he talked about starting a competitor to Twitter and doing it himself from scratch, but ultimately believed that it would just jumpstart what he wanted if he could just buy the company outright.
I think the way to think about this is, this is a toy for him in the way that billionaires buy yachts or football teams. He bought a whole company.
And I just wonder, or rather remind us of that transition period, because there's some images that I can't get out of my head. Like, it was so chaotic and he stopped paying the bills, including for some of the cleaning companies, and people couldn't find loo paper, toilet paper when they needed it. I mean, it sounds absolutely ridiculous. Tell us about that period and tell us how many people actually ended up getting fired or just quitting.
Yeah, I mean, there's 75%, more than 75% less people who work at Twitter now. We're talking about cutting janitorial services to the point where there's no one to replace the toilet paper or clean or empty the trash cans. We talked to employees who remembered the smell inside these offices because they were working late hours, ordering food. They actually crammed people up onto the same floors to open space because they didn't want to pay for those other floors. And, just kind of very visceral memories that we had that people shared with us. Gosh, they didn't pay for Twitter's former management bought Elon a gift basket, a jacket, all these kind of tchotchkes that they shared with him when he bought the company. He ended up not paying that bill to that gift company, and they ended up, I believe they sued him.
Yeah, they
right?
sued him.
So it's down to the last penny. There was nothing that went contested. Yeah.
And I guess the point of that was to kind of lower the costs and bring down the payroll. But he's lost a ton of money, in the way that he's managed X anyway. So has that worked out for him financially?
No, it really hasn't. And I think, again, he was not thinking this deal through and was not thinking about running a company that relies on advertising for revenue. He was thinking really about controlling the platform and the kinds of speech that are allowed there. But, Tesla has famously never advertised for its vehicles. Musk has really looked down his nose at the advertising industry and didn't understand the expectations that those advertisers would have of him coming in. And, as they've pressured him to do something about the rise of explicit and offensive content on the platform, he's dug his heels in and fought them.
He has this expectation that they should advertise to support free speech. And if they don't, he's going to sue them. And now we're seeing some of those lawsuits play out in the US courts. I think a lot of experts that we've talked to have said there's really no chance of them winning, but at least he can, muck up the game. He can cause a lot of strife within these advertisers so they think twice about challenging him.
Why do you think he's shifted so much towards the right? Why do you think he's saying the things that he said about civil war in the UK, for instance? What's going on in his mind?
I think Musk really derives a lot of his opinion from the kinds of content that he sees on X. And he's also someone who is sensitive to praise. He gravitates towards communities that praise him and support him. And, over the years, he has clashed with President Biden, other Democratic leaders, and he's received a lot of adulation from the right. And so I think that has really shifted him. He also sees this content on X and takes it at face value. So you often see him falling for conspiracy theories or picking up on right-wing narratives and amplifying them because that's the media ecosystem that he's submerged in.
He really seems to hate woke with a capital H. Is that fair?
Yeah. I mean, this amorphous idea of the woke mind virus, this idea that the progressive left is taking over conversations, changing society, he had a daughter who transitioned many years ago, and that clearly isolated him and changed him. Things like COVID, for example, changed him. And he believes all that is kind of, mixed together in this idea of wokeness that is challenging him, that is challenging progress in society, and he's pushing back on that.
So how would his daughter, being in transition, fuel his hatred of woke?
He said in interviews that he felt that she was sort of brainwashed into that decision. It's not one that he supported, and it caused friction between them. I think he's also said in interviews that he basically views her as dead. He feels like he's lost a child. And so he's reacted to that with quite a bit of anger and felt like there's some political agenda that has taken a child out of his life.
One of the things I find really fascinating about him, and indeed a lot of these other, social media billionaires, is they have so much money. They have so much communicative power, almost pharaonic powers of communication. Almost 200 million followers. I mean, that's huge. That's almost as many followers as there are, voting citizens in the United States. And that power is unaccountable, is it not? I mean, other than to the shareholders, but he's got enough money to basically, fill any black holes. What does it say to you about the nature of power and the nature of the United States today, that you have people like billionaires like Elon Musk, wielding so much power?
And the nature of wealth inequality, around the world. It's a major theme of our book. This is someone who is worth on any given day $250 billion. So when you're worth that much and you pay $44 billion for a company, that's like me or you buying a car, that these are not normal purchases that we think about in our daily lives. I don't know the last time you thought about buying a whole company. How do you hold these people accountable? I think of something like in 2018, for example, when he was not as well known, but he's on Twitter talking about taking Tesla private. This very famous tweet about taking the company private caused a lot of ruckus in the investing community. And the SEC investigates him, he sues him, and he settles for a $20 million fine. Well, what is $20 million for someone that is worth $250 billion? That's a parking ticket, right? And so that's what we're talking about when we're talking about this level of wealth inequality. There's no way to hold these people accountable.
And yet they do come up against institutions. The European Union has picked a fight with Musk over X. Others will do the same. And here the members of the Labour Party in this country, after his civil war comments, were saying we should get off X. Let's boycott the social media platform. I'm not sure if they have. I haven't read that they have, but that's what they were contemplating. What is the biggest challenge, do you think, to Musk and X going forward?
I think there's very little regulatory pressure on him in the United States, particularly if Trump wins a second term in the White House. But there is a lot of international pressure on him, particularly around content moderation. You mentioned the European Union. There's potential trouble for Twitter there. And we've also recently seen the platform banned in Brazil completely because of a spat over content moderation. So internationally, I think the platform and Musk himself are facing a lot of pressure. And there is a chance that we may see him reined in a little bit by those other governments.
The title of your book the subtitle is, how Musk destroyed Twitter. But has he actually destroyed Twitter, do you think?
I think the subtitle is meant to be provocative, and it's meant to, stir up a debate. But I think there are a lot of merits to that argument. For one, the company is known as X. Twitter no longer exists. I mean, we call it Twitter as kind of a reflex, but it is effectively X. I don't know what the verb is for that, but we're still figuring that out, I guess. From a financial perspective, we talked about this earlier, but the company is worth less than half of what he paid it by his own internal metrics.
But it doesn't make him bankrupt, does it? I mean, he's got enough money to deal with those losses.
Who can take that? He crashed his car, essentially, if we're using that car metaphor for someone buying a car. But in that perspective, he has destroyed the value of the company. And we're not even talking about the content moderation decisions that he's made, or the people that he's let back, or the people that he's driven away.
And just finally, he may have crashed his favorite Lamborghini. He's still got another 5 in the garage. But to what extent has his treatment of Twitter, or mistreatment, if you like, changed or imperiled the nature of American democracy, or indeed democracy elsewhere?
I think that he has made a mainstream social media platform into a platform that more and more is explicitly right-wing. And that's something we've never seen before. A lot of these social media platforms are accused of political bias, but they do a lot of work and to strive to remain neutral on politics. And the kinds of social media platforms that have pursued a specific political agenda have tended to be smaller and more fringe. And so I think as he skews the political nature of the platform, there's a potential for it to influence real world events. And we're starting to see that play out already. We've seen it here in the United States on January 6th, where online conversation led to real world violence. That's also happened in Brazil and very recently in the UK.
And I think I think it remains to be seen what happens with this election, but something like what we've seen this week with the dogs and cats rumor in Springfield, Ohio, that started or was spread largely on X, and was boosted by Musk himself. And that became a major debate talking point. You have Trump saying he's going to go to that area now to investigate.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. Kate Conger and Ryan Mack, thank you very much to both of you for appearing on the American Forecast. The book is, of course, called Character Limit: How Elon Musk Destroyed Twitter. Thanks to both of you.